So the byline for this session is really creating products that your customers actually want to purchase from you, right? So key word there is really customers. Who are our customers? We talked a lot about this. So let's dig in. Do we even know who our customers are, and how do we get in and actually understand them? So let's start with who is our customer as we're thinking about what you guys are doing in the market.
Shall we start from that?
Yeah, let's start with Sabeeh.
Sure. So who is the customer? That's a great question. I think, looking around the room, we have different organizations from telcos to technology providers, all trying to identify, whose problem should we solve. Yesterday, we heard a lot about APIs. APIs don't quite solve an end user's problem. So I think defining that really sets kind of the North Star for what comes after to actually address this problem.
Yeah.
From where we sit, enabling CSPs to solve their enterprise customer problems, we have customers in the entire chain, right? We've got an end user, we've got a CSP, we've got the buying customer. So it's really important to actually, figure out what your message is to each individual decision maker, kind of along that line.
Yeah. Mark, in your end.
So to me, the first question is always, what problem do you want to solve? And then you will find try to find a group of customers that fits the problem that you want to solve.
Yeah.
So always start with the problem.
Yeah.
I like to follow the money. So what I mean by that is, who is a customer? The customer is the person who has a want or a need and is willing to pay for it. And we've heard a lot of talk about developers over the last couple of days, but ultimately, those guys, they're not the ones who have the money. They might give me the money, but they get their money from the end users. So for me, this all comes from, and I think we had it from our teacher earlier at the beginning, it's the customers of the guys, the end customers who actually have the problem and the need.
Absolutely. I'm constantly reminding my customers, like, who is my customer? My customer is the person paying me. But ultimately, they can't pay me unless they're successful. So I'm always reminding my customers, well, who is your customer? Who are you targeting? What is their need, right? And those are very, very different things. And it's making sure that people stay on topic. That's really, really challenging.
Yeah. So Ralph, you're in this interesting space where you've got to sell to telcos, and then you've got to also help them sell to customers. So you're probably better than anybody else in trying to really suss out what the voice of the customer is, and you've got to do it twice, selling to the telcos and then selling to the customers. How do you pull that voice of customer, and then how do you also help the telcos really get in and understand the voice of the customer?
Yeah, I believe the honest answer is you have to really understand the customer, and that's a really easy thing to say. But if you think about it, everyone pretty much has been talking about customer CX from a comms background. Now, why is that? It's because we're all probably have a career in comms. So, I used to work on contact centers, so I understand contact center problems quite well. I call contact centers, so I know the frustrations of being a customer. And even when you start going out into the finance and the security and the things that we've heard about, we all live and suffer those problems. But how many of us know what the doctors are worried about? What frustrations do they have? Can we help them? Are there any issues in security? And so it's about really understanding your verticals, and there's no shortcut to that, because if you don't know what their problems are, you can't help them, and they won't come to you because they don't know that you can help them. No one wakes up in the hospital and thinks, I must call that bloke Ralph who works in comms because he can help me with a customer who's got depression. They just don't think that. Yeah. But if I can find out, we do have the tools to help them.
Yeah. So Mark, with multiple exits under your belt,
so,
you obviously figured it out.
I always share, because I've helped thousands of startup founders asking the right questions, because it's all about the art of asking the right questions. And I always share a story which happened to me. In 2005, 2004, we were the founders of Hapgids, which were the predecessor of Just Eat. And we were selling online a portal to create more revenue for the restaurant owners. And they were looking at us like, oh, okay. But it opened up to me once I sat down and literally worked with a famous a pizza restaurant in Utrecht called Pinocchio, and I still can sign his face. So he was literally looking at me like, I don't need more of you. So what the hell are you doing for me? He said, let me help you for one evening, and I will sit down and look what you are doing. And I still have the skills of pizza making after that evening. And I saw that his problem was not more revenue, but he needed to pick up the phone the entire time. And each time when he picked up the phone, he was upset because he was losing his art of making pizzas. And I said, I'm not going to create more revenue. I'm going to help you focusing on your operations, and so you never have to pick up the phone again. And he was looking at me like, wow, where have you been all my life? So I was selling to him a solution. For a year, I was not able to convert him, but after that night, he became one of our biggest ambassadors.
Yeah. So Henry Ford, I think this is a good example of the Henry Ford quote. If I had asked the customer or the driver what they wanted, they would ask for a faster horse, right?
But if he would sit down and not pitch his car, but listen to what the horses are doing, but literally they're bringing them from A to B, and if you would have been offering, I can also help you going from A to B faster. Would you like that? Oh yeah. And how the solution would look like, everybody starts with pitching a solution. Stop doing that.
Yeah. So if you had sat down, or you had been sitting down with the owner, did he even think about what you were offering?
No. Internet.
Yeah.
His cousin made some sort of a website, and he did not have me email. So we were able to convert the order via a fax machine. Yeah. And he even did not have a fax machine. He was literally looking at me like, huh, fax? Do I need to put the pizza in the fax? No. The order will come out the fax, and so you don't have to pick up the phone. And then you can read out of the fax, and then somebody else is bringing the pizza to the restaurant. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't have to put the pizza in the fax. No, please not, because then I need to buy a new fax.
So Sabeeh and Dan, you guys are literally creating custom solutions. You've obviously got customers that are thinking in one way, and you've got to suss out what the actual challenge is.
Exactly. Yeah, so I appreciate you telling that story, because I think that really synthesizes kind of our daily life. You sit down and the customer is saying, okay, this is what my enterprise wants to buy. And then, they'll come up to you with a feature or say, hey, you have that API, can we use it to solve this? It's like, hold on, what are they trying to accomplish here? So I think listening and asking the right questions really sets you up to actually be like Einstein, right? Spend 55 minutes talking about the problem, really digging in on why does that problem exist? What created the circumstance for that problem to arise? And then finally, solutioning, that's where our mind goes, right? As soon as customer says something that matches with an API, we just want to dump that in front of them and say, okay, this sale is done.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more problem to be solved there. There's a lot more of a specific solution, that can be kind of drafted up to that. And it doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be super technical. You can do it literally sitting there with pictures, and drawing pictures to actually observe what the customer does. So a lot of it actually ends up being an exercise of self-awareness, when...
Indeed, and not pitching your own solution, because
Exactly.
that's 99% of founders are doing that, but also, failing their company because of it.
Yeah. Dan, what's your approach?
I can't add too much other than, yes, you're kind of like a therapist, right? You're sat there listening to their problems and going, here's the solution. Here's a potential solution. And then, well, what do therapists do? They don't give you a whole solution. You work through it. So you work from A to B to C. You build a skateboard, and then you build, a bike, and then a car, and then you build a bus. So doing things in the right way. And then my last point is, these conversations don't happen virtually. They just don't work virtually. We all work in telecoms or whatever, and we're all very, very used to doing video calls or whatever. But you can't figure out that the guy, is picking up his phone by sitting on a video call all day. You actually have to be there, and you actually have to engage personally. And I think that's something that we're losing at the moment. an awful lot of my clients are starting to go, oh, well, we don't need to see you on site. We don't need that weekly thing that happens every quarter or whatever. We can just do a video call. I'm like, no, personal stuff is really important, and we can't lose that.
Yeah. So this sounds like the exact opposite of what a company that builds products to sell at scale and ship at scale and deal with massive gigabytes per second. So how do you take this super nuanced and super personal approach and bake that into, or at least bring it into a company that is designed around scale and doing exactly not that? Right? I guess, Ralph, why don't we start with you?
So I think that's a really tough question, actually, and it's probably the key question. There is no way around, in my opinion, initially starting by focusing on a set of solutions that a customer wants. I think if you think you're going to just have, let's go back to the old way of doing things, a classic, I'm going to have lots of APIs and people are going to come and build stuff. They're not. They're not going to come because they don't know that you have the stuff that can solve their problem, going back to their problem. So you have to start off by choosing maybe some verticals, or if you've got some expertise in a certain area, you focus on that and you build applications. You have to get your senior management brought into spending the money on that as well. So, there's going to be a little bit of money spent. But what you're really doing is seeding the market. So what you really want to do is show the art of the possible. It's not that you're doing a solution for that company, but you're showing, or you're using that company to show the world what you're capable of. And for me, all of the CX stuff that we've talked about is partly driven because we already understand the customer need, but also because people have seen stuff and said, oh, that's really cool, but could you add this? And then these guys get involved and things get added. But to get out into those other areas, to get to that 20+ billion that we've all been talking about yesterday, you do have to make some decisions and actually spend some money and get going.
Yeah. So E&D took an interesting approach, right? They actually, for anybody that wasn't here yesterday, they actually stood up an entire separate organization, right? Got out of the day in the life of a telco. And if you've worked in a telco and you've tried to implement software solutions, you always get bogged down in the telco way of thinking. It's got to be scaled. You got to worry about CDRs and all of these things that as a software company you don't worry about. So E&D is a really good example.
Yeah, and they didn't worry about the technology actually. So if you look at what they did, is they built their practice and they said, right, we've got a bunch of stuff. E&D's quite difficult because they work in the Middle East, so a lot of stuff has to be in their network. So they worked with partners who could bring things to meet the regulator, but they work with partners. The practice is owned by E&D. They're the guys who understand the customer. They go and find that need, and then they have the freedom to use their own stuff if they've got it, or go and get something else. But fundamentally, they had a big bet on building that practice, and it's worked out really well for them.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Small startups within big organizations work really, really well. And they take a bit of time to change people's mindsets on how they work. Yeah. Bring key members from those bigger organizations in and go, oh, you've got some freedom. And that freedom can really, really work. So I've seen it numerous times where I kind of get brought into the startup part of a bigger org. And they deliver things super quick. You give people freedom, and they're able to kind of sidestep themselves.
And how did the team look like? Because I've run, I think, 9 corporate accelerator programs, and they all fail.
Oh, really?
Because of shitty teams. So how does an ideal customer development team look like in your cases?
Oh, I mean, so they've always brought in higher level developers, but then also they've always brought in key project managers and key people from all of from that whole org, and be able to bring up a whole team. So it's well-trained developers, well-trained testers, well-trained people that actually understand. There's no point building something that's really great if it's never going to scale in the future. You don't want to build it to scale immediately, but you can't build it not to scale. You can't put yourself into a corner, and that's why things fail, because the right people weren't in the right team.
Especially also that they were part of it for a longer period of time, so they also made a longer time commitment. In our case, as many people were involved, and it was they looked at it from some sort of side hustle or making a career within a corporate. And we all know that you don't build a company from scratch within 3 months, so it takes a longer period of time. And after 1.5 years, the key person left the team in Bush. You saw it deflating.
Did the team, because you said the team was poor, but was it the team or did the organization fail them?
No, so that's what we've learned. You only need to have C-level, some sort of what we call shit umbrella. Because without that shit umbrella, you only get like all kinds of people in that know better. So we literally create off-site small teams, no developers, only align with developers to check whether it was scalable or not, because developers don't listen. They want to build stuff, right? And so we had people from the organization themselves, from sales, but we had one person who was really good at setting up the right questions without any prejudice, without any some sort of knowledge of the market whatsoever, just like, asking dumb questions. And that worked.
Good developers listen.
So we talk a lot about use cases, and I think in this example, one good use case, one good example from somewhere in the organization can really light a fire and really light the way for the rest of the organization, like, oh, wow, we can do that? Oh, that's how that was done. Would love to close with some examples on a customer problem that you guys have worked through that really turned into an aha and ultimately turned into an innovation, either in the product or how that product was delivered. So, Sabeeh, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, for us, we deliver an SMS product, and as mentioned earlier, SMS is being inundated by a lot of self-regulation through the 10DLC process. And so we knew that was really affecting our customers' experience because they weren't spending more time in our product, they were spending more time trying to register to be able to get their traffic approved. And we're like, okay, well, if we can actually help in addressing that problem, it would make things a lot easier. And turns out that actually is a problem that they're faced not only with our product, but across many, many other products. So sitting there and many times the challenge can be to get them to trust you enough to actually open up about their problems.
Yeah.
But, over time, as you build that trusted relationship and you show that you're vested in solving, that type of problem with them, we saw that, with our 10DLC experience that we created to simplify the registration process, they feel very relieved that there's actually somebody in it to help them with that.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. And Mark, you had faxing pizzas, right?
So with a large FMCG company, we run an internal accelerator program, and we got some sort of a brief from management, B2B. B2B subscription, something. I thought, okay. And of course, using our methodology, we got, of course, negative validation from that market, but we ended up talking with a lot of C's, consumers. And their problem was that often they would like to be receiving some sort of exact doses. We're talking about 10 years ago. Exact doses of detergent. So together with the customer, we developed some sort of a dispenser for your washing machine. You should click on, and then you put it in the right dose into the machine. But the beauty of it, the packaging was commerce. So you could send it, order it, click, 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 and then through the post, you could receive your monthly, yearly, or even weekly subscription of soap. And then we had a huge validation, huge customer group, but then the guy, the key man left because he was promoted somewhere else, and the project went down the drain after 1.5 years. So that was the example that I was focusing on.
Cool. One more.
So I want to use mine as an illustration of going outside of our communication experience. So I didn't do that in this case. So we, as part of our set of solutions, we are able to have audio and video bots. So I thought, I'm going to go to medical shows. So luckily, my company, my boss allows me to go to various other verticals and just learn and try and get our products out there. So I went along to a medical vertical show. And basically, I thought, right, I'm going to talk about my bots, and it's going to be FAQs, and I'm going to talk about how maybe it can, people can be put through to a bot, and it can maybe collect some information while you're waiting to talk to the doctor. And I got a bit of traction, people were a bit interested, and I did this at several shows, and I was getting a bit depressed about it, to be honest. Then a guy comes up to me afterwards, and he's a doctor, and he says to me, he says that chatbot and video bot thing, could you do one that looks like me, so that when my customers who are old and at home alone are ringing in to give in their blood tests, I can ask them how the football went last night. And I was like, the football went last night? He says, yeah, I want the bot to dip a CRM. I want it to, he didn't say this because he didn't know what CRM was, but he was basically saying, I want to be able to look at what, I want to have a list of what the people's interests are. I want to ask a couple of questions about their interests. So football was the obvious one. So I need to know what the score was. I need to know what team he supports. And I did the thing that you probably are all thinking, which is, well, why on earth would anyone want to talk to a bot about a football game? And he said, yeah, but you don't understand. These people are sitting there on their own all day doing nothing. They don't have any contact with family often. They're just sitting there watching TV. They look forward to the call just to hand over their blood pressure today. So by actually having an interaction that says, oh, did you see the European game last night? Chelsea had a quick bit of AI. Who scored? We can just ask a couple of questions, and we can make an interaction that breaks up their daily lives. And I'm sure everyone here would never have thought of that. And that's why I'm saying that, that's just one example in one vertical. I've got plenty of others. Some I'm willing to share, and some we're working on, so I'm keeping them to myself. But this is where we could be really powerful if we can get our message out there.
Super cool. And not something if you weren't talking with the customer and actually thinking beyond just how do I scale this as massively as possible. Not something.
But actually, I should say as well, okay, you're spending time sending someone like me to go out there. But now, I'm now spinning in my head all the sorts of things I can think about. I've gone from there to how can we keep people out in their homes longer if they've got dementia. And there are things that we as a communications industry have that can actually do that. And people are paying $8,000 a month to put their people in a home. So if you can keep them out even for just a year, it's nearly $100,000 you've saved them. So we could do massive things if we get to the right people.
It's fun. That's awesome stuff. So we're running a little bit behind, and I know I think we've got lunch out there. We don't?
We're good. We still got a few minutes. Let's ask some questions.
We're good, okay.
Yep.
So let's, you got the mic box?
I'm getting it.
Who's got?
Very quickly, while we're waiting for that, you can do so much with that, right? You can record these conversations, and then you can analyze them and go, oh, there's degeneration over time. Something's happened. You can use that data in so many different ways, and it's again looking at the problem differently, looking at what you can do with that data, with that interaction differently, and it's so vital.
Super cool.
Any questions for the group?
Yeah.
I think I'll walk this one over.
Thanks. So we're hearing a lot about talking to end users and getting ideas and trying to build products for scale. I guess one of the questions is, I'm hearing a lot about sort of the yeses, but what sort of challenges do you find on working out when to say no to something? How do you work out when to turn down an idea, when to stop extending?
I never say no.
He doesn't say no. he says yes.
As an investor, you always say, you always look at scale because, you want to have a scalable solution out there. So what we have created 72 proof points from literally idea stage till scale, and to be able to listen 90% to the customer problem, but there's also a big validation in it. Can a potential solution be really scalable and of course at a cost-effective way, because I've seen many companies fail, that they validated a problem, but the solution was twice as big as the value of a problem. Use and control, company dead on the ground. So that's a really important part of the validation process. So we used only after creating a very proper problem thesis, we discuss with the IT guys on, okay, what would a scalable solution look like, but also most importantly, what would it cost to scale together with the company?
I tell my customers all the time no. Probably in one of my first meetings, I'll always tell them, I'm very, very honest with my customers. They come to me and say, oh, we want to build this and that, and we want to self-host it because we want control. And my biggest bit of advice for any customer coming to me wanting to build something is, well, can a CPaaS do it for you? You don't want to go and spend all of that money building this out for yourself. It's going to take you a year to even get to that point where you can actually get it out to a customer. Instead, think about, other ways of getting to your end goal. And so usually that's go and use a CPaaS until it costs too much money, at which point you've got a nice problem to have, and then you can go and build it yourself, or go move somewhere else that's able to get you better rates. So that's just one example. Like being honest with your customer. My customer is the person paying the bill at the end of the day. Being honest with them and telling them, well, that's not possible today, or it's possible, but it's gonna, bankrupt you. AI, sorry, I said the word. AI is a great example. The number of customers that I have saying, well, we don't want to send our data to, OpenAI or Google or whoever. Ignoring, HIPAA, ignoring all of that, right? They just don't want to send their data elsewhere, and they want to run it themselves. And they've heard great things about all of these open source projects that they can go and self-host, for example. I'm a lover of open source software. We build 99% of our stuff on open source software. And some open source AI type people will disagree with me right now. But AI is not something that you want to be doing yourself right now. You want the likes of Meta and OpenAI spending the millions and billions on graphics cards and whatever else, and taking that hit for you. Until a time comes in the very near future, it's getting closer and closer, where you can go and confidently spend some money on a graphics card, many graphics cards, and know that they're not going to be out of date in a month's time. So being honest with your customer is super important.
I think I'll just try and keep it short. I think when you say no is when you realize that customer is falling outside of your ideal customer profile, right? You commit yourself to a customer and say, this is how I define my customer segment to be as well as you can. And when they start asking for stuff that puts them outside of that box, then it prevents you from being able to focus. So you want to be able to focus as much as you can.
Looks like you lost the box, but what company are you with?
Well, I'm with the security side. I was really thinking a bit more from, we heard in one of the earlier examples, it's almost a starting point with guardrails. And so I'm thinking sometimes that sort of having knowledge of all of the different guardrails. I mean, you mentioned sort of almost, let's say, the ethics side. I deal personally in the security side. Sometimes almost there's a willingness to say yes, not considering the implications, not just keep going.
Yeah.
Where does this take us? Is this going to result in something? For example, when we had the case of the police support, that sounded like it was well designed because it integrated into a human handoff. But what if it was just designed as a chatbot without that capability? Could that have led an expectation without then safe, secure follow-up process? Would that have actually resulted in a worse outcome, perhaps? And so I'm just sort of interested in where we collectively gain the experience from to be able to look at every problem, say, okay, we can ascertain guardrails, we can look at this at a broader side, not just what the customer's asking for, but faster horse. How can we consider these things from the outset to create the right solution?
I have a solution this afternoon.
So the point was about security and bringing in just for the recording, bringing in other ideals, other thought processes. The simple answer is you hire someone like me. You hire an external who's able to come in and give you that guidance. And because generally when you're in an organization, you're kind of laser focused on whatever you're doing. And you don't necessarily know what's happening within the industry elsewhere. I spend my time knowing what's going on across the whole of the industry. And that's why people come to me for guidance and for help building solutions. And you don't need to bring me in for the whole thing, but like having that, what else, what are we not seeing? What are we not thinking about? That kind of session is super important.
I think I've seen that quite often we're held in check actually by the organizations. So when you pitch something, quite often the first question will be, oh yeah, but what about the regulatory, or what about the security of the data? So in some ways it's self-policing. I guess the danger is if you start developing something and it's only when you're halfway through that you suddenly go, oh, hang on a minute, I've got some data here and I need to think about what I'm going to do with it. So, you know, despite the fact that I said, you know, I never say no, there's a difference between, I'm going to call it innovating, which is taking functions and features that we understand and have and creating these things and doing something like the doctor's example that I gave you, versus custom, which is literally, we're going to custom build something, no one else is going to buy it. You know, do we want to go there? And that's what I see a difference.
I think the other, and you're in a perfect example, or in a perfect position as on the sales side, right? You've got a team behind you that's also keeping you in check. So if you've got a question, you're going back to a product leader, or you're going back to some other expert, like not necessarily having to hire an outside expert, but you've got a team behind you. And I'm assuming you guys have a team behind you as well that you're leaning into certain people, and it's not just one salesperson out there making a decision, right?
Unless the salesperson goes rogue and says, yes, we can do that.
Yeah.
And then you're screwed.
Yeah, which we've never had a salesperson do that. So, yeah. Any other questions?
All right, we've got time for one last question.
Thank you to all the panelists. I believe it was Ralph in one of his comments who said something to the effect of putting an API out there won't automatically bring people to it. You need to kind of sell developers or users on using it. And so I'm curious to hear the panel's thoughts on with network APIs, what needs to be done in the near future in terms of you know, selling developers and more importantly, perhaps their end users of their applications on using the network APIs.
You want to start?
You might not like my answer. As a sales guy who doesn't necessarily understand how development is done, who's talking to the end customers, I hesitate to put it this way, I don't care that these new network APIs have been announced. I care that what they can give my customer, but the customer doesn't understand that. So no one woke up this morning thinking, oh, I need a bit of network slicing in my life. But if you could say to them, you know, someone had an example, I think it was Dean Bubley, is it? Yesterday was talking about the drone, and so the drone operators are very much worried about, oh, you know, what happens if I lose control of my drone and my very expensive camera crashes and burns? So here's someone who very much needs the network APIs, doesn't know about it. So my answer would be, it's another set of capabilities that allows us to then start creating those customer examples that we've been talking about. That in themselves, if you go around saying, I've got network APIs, for me, not sure.
I think the way to simplify that is put the network APIs in context of the problem that they're solving. So not starting with network APIs, but starting from how within healthcare can a certain network API actually be useful? How within finance, how within retail can this be useful? And developers, you know, they very much do develop or focus on specific verticals, and they'll understand very quickly, oh, you know, I can really enable this specific use case or enhance the user experience in this way by integrating that network API. So, you know, developer advocacy is not just, here's how to use the API, but it's, you know, building template apps like Adnan said yesterday, that actually get them to envision how that might change the actual customer experience.
The CPaaSs do this really, really well, right? So you want to go build a product. How do you go and do that? Well, Twilio has really great docs, for example. That's how they got really great. They don't just have great docs. They've got, they used to have an army of people who would go to every single conference, and you'd create this personal relationship with someone, and they were a dev advocate. Telcos don't really have that, right? They're this big incumbent and, doesn't move forward very well. This is where people like Infobip are going to help. I hope it's not just Infobip, etc. I hope developers who want to be able to access these APIs directly are still going to be able to going forwards. But this is where, telcos need to get better at, this is the kind of stuff you can do with it, and teaching people.
Yeah.
Because, developers that build things don't necessarily understand networks, right? What is 5G slicing? What's the benefit of it? What is quality on demand? There's a whole lesson here. And then a final point is things need to move quicker. Things need to actually be available and to be able to play with it, because we've really we've been challenged in that area. Actually being able to go and say, oh, I've tried to build this thing and it's just not working the way that I would expect it to. Things work very, very differently outside of labs, and so being able to actually play with something is really important, and that's something that I think we're failing at the moment, or we're not failing. Telcos / whoever has access today, they're failing.
Yeah.
But they're trying to be better. T-Mobile have hackathon-type days coming up that you can apply for. I think the last date you can apply for it is first week of October. So you can go and apply, and you can go and play with these things, I think.
And there's no one silver bullet either, right? It's not, if we just do this, network APIs are going to flourish. It's everything that we're talking about here this week, which is let's get into the use cases, let's get out and start to engage companies, let's start to get into verticals. We've got some great use cases around the banking vertical, right? We've got great use cases. When you go to MWC, you get to listen to drones flying around the entire MWC, right? So we've got a handful of use cases that are out there on specific verticals, continuing to develop that, and then going out and engaging those communities. That's just another step, but it's certainly not just one thing that's going to get us to network API prosperity.